Hey all, and welcome back to Professor Layton and the Curious Village. In this part we're going into Chapter 2, and this is the part in the game where the chapters start getting a little bit longer, a little bit more substantial, and that's both in terms of the story that we're going to be seeing, we'll be seeing a lot more character interactions, and also in terms of the puzzles. But to start us off with in this chapter, if you remember at the end of the last part, what we saw was we'd just got to the manor, and as soon as we arrived, Lady Dahlia started freaking out because her cat had run away. So we've got a very pampered, very coddled cat that's just run out into the wild, and that doesn't necessarily bode well. Because that's the thing with cats, there's some cats that are very much outside cats and they just go explore on their own, and that's all well and good. But cats that have spent their whole life being like the equivalent of the handbag chihuahua, like they're the cat equivalent of that, to then possibly get into a fight with a ruffian, that's not going to go too well. But it looks like she didn't get that far right away. Like, yeah, we've just seen her and she's bolted again. So, as you can probably tell from both this first interaction and the title of the chapter, we are going to be spending a significant part of this video just looking for the fucking cat. But here we have our introduction to the mysterious character of this game, who is setting us up as a kind of opponent for the treasure, for the golden apple itself. They're doing the thing of we know nothing about this guy, and they're gonna keep that up for a little while yet. But I will say, in terms of how this game handles the conflict, I actually really appreciate how slowly it builds in. And that might not be the case for everyone, and I understand that. But for me, I feel, like I've mentioned, the biggest strength of this game for me is the setting, with a secondary strength for this being the character interactions. And I like that we have a good few chapters time to kind of settle into this village and get to know everybody and get to memorize all the different locations and the different landmarks and whatnot before we have any major plot go on. Because, like, I know I joked about having the go find the cat mission as being like a menial task for a detective to be going on, or not a detective, but like a professor to be going on. But all this kind of stuff, this is very much setting the scene. Because on this little fetch quest, we're going to go meet a lot of people who we talk to about where the cat's gone, whether they've seen the cat. And we're also going to see the different major landmarks of St. Mystere. And honestly, I just really appreciate the slower pace in this particular scenario. Which isn't the case for every game. There's a lot of games that I do just like to get into the action. But this isn't, it's not Sonic. It's not like an action game. We want to get a feel for what's going on here before we start worrying about who's about. And yeah, that there is just another maths puzzle. So I have nothing to say about the maths puzzles, as I said. So you're going to have to take the game's like explanations at their word for that one. Yeah, and also rest in peace to the two people who didn't quite make it back. They do add a lot of character to these puzzles, which is another layer of bringing you into the game's world. But yeah, like I was saying, we get all this time to explore the village, and we have quite a few interactions with the various villagers. Not all of whom are plot important, but they're there for the sake of world building, which doubles down on that. And I will be talking to a lot of the characters as we go along. It might end up padding out the playthrough a lot longer than it needs to be, but I kind of feel that it's just a benefit of this game's writing, that all the characters are endearing in their own ways. But yes, we have found a little secret room off to the side that's been left open. And we're actually going to get 2 puzzles in here right now, and we will also get more puzzles in here later on when we come back. Let's poach all the fucking hint coins before we do anything productive in here, because, you know, I like that. I like just collecting things that I don't even need. So, puzzle 14, which chair? This is more a simple kind of puzzle. There isn't really much to think about here. It is just basically what it says, in that we have a need for a certain kind of chair that fits this purpose. So it can be easily stacked and they can be put away. It's for a multi-purpose event hall, and it's going to be which they're not the most comfortable chairs in the world, but when we need a lot of them and we need to be able to put them away tidy and we need to be able to just move them around and do whatever we need to do with them, this is your best pick. As much as I really don't like sitting on these plasticky chairs with the hard plastic backs, you know, they're not really that comfortable. I can't really say too much, given what I'm sitting on right now is a swivel chair that has most of the lining on it ripped apart where it's old and it's damaged, but at least it's not got a plastic back. Although saying that, when we do the group commentaries with myself, Stephen and Chris, and we have to rearrange my room, we do end up falling back on these wooden garden chairs that I have. And so they're not particularly comfortable either, but they've been part of our setup since 2012, and I have the feeling they're not being replaced anytime soon. But this is a trick kind of puzzle, because they're giving you all this information about how many have been extinguished and how many have gone out over time. We're shutting the window, and that's leading up to a little bit of a trick here, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. There we go. So what it was actually baiting you into picking out from the information that it gave us is that the ones that had been put out are gonna be safe. They're still gonna be there. It's the ones that were still alight that are gonna melt away to nothing. So that did actually catch me out. That is one that I had to use hints for when I first played this. In fact, I can't remember whether I used hints or whether I just gave up and just looked it up online. But you know, like that is one of my favourite kind of puzzles to see. Not so much for the working it out side of things, but I do enjoy the moment of realization once I've either looked it up or I've figured it out. Because then it's like, oh, you crafty bugger. You know, like it gives me that kind of feeling, and I do. Sometimes I feel glad about it. Sometimes it impresses me that they managed to sneak it past me. Other times I just think, okay, you're being clever with me now. So the problem that Franco is dealing with here is that the little crank thing from the bridge that we used to get in, that's gone missing. And so that means that we're essentially trapped in the village now. So we've got another mission that's gonna make itself known over the course of time. But first, we have this gizmos mechanic. This is another mechanic like the painting scraps one that's gonna just keep on going over time, and ultimately I'm not gonna think too much of it until we've got all the pieces. And you get the pieces, like with the painting scraps, from completing certain puzzles from certain characters. But you can kind of see from the silhouette right there of what it's going to form. Over time, we are going to form a dog. That is not a spoiler because they literally show you the fucking outline. But it's a case of just, as long as you complete all the puzzles in the game, you will just get it without having any kind of issue. And this is one thing that I do want to give a bit of a shout out to if you're just looking to play the game casually and get all the puzzles without missing any. And that is the strategy wiki walkthrough. And the reason I like that is that it has the guide of where to go and who to talk to on one page. And if you want the answer to the puzzle, you have to click through. So you're not going to accidentally spoil yourself if you want to work out the puzzles themselves, just for yourself. If you just want to use it as a guide of like where the hint coins are or where the characters with puzzles are, just so you don't miss anything, the strategy wiki guide is a good guide to use, so I recommend that. But this particular puzzle is one trying to work out how many times you would need to draw the little tiny triangles to fill up the big triangle. And what you got to realise to figure this one out is that the middle triangles between the ones you have to draw are already made. And that affects how many pen strokes you need to make to create this thing. So that one, it's not quite so much of a it's being clever with you one. It's more a case of just think it through beyond the initial, okay, I need to make this many triangles thing. So, like, I guess if you were to have a scale of sorts, there's like a scale of trickery to you just need to think like a normal person. You need to think a little bit more clearly than just what it throws right at you. And that was very much on a case of it's pretty basic if you just think about it a little bit deeper than face value. And yay, we've got the dog's tail finished. Not a dog though, totally not a dog. What a loon. Why do I get the feeling that there's probably somewhere in the world where that's considered like not PC? And yes, that's the other reason why I would suggest using the strategy wiki guide. It is useful to be able to find the hidden puzzles as you go along, just so you can kind of complete them without having to go back to places you've already been. But this is a basic 50-50 kind of deal, like another one where they're giving you a lot of information as a red herring thing. But just ignore the unnecessary information and realise that the chance of drawing a card of a certain colour is going to be the same whether that's on your first draw or whether that's on your 1000th draw. So again, pretty simple puzzle, but you have to filter it down. You have to not let yourself get tricked by unnecessary information. Also, card puzzles are a kind of puzzle that I kind of enjoy purely on the basis of I spent a lot of time playing card games over the course of my life, mainly in my childhood, but still today I occasionally go back to play Solitaire, mainly on the PC. The new Windows 10 version, it might be a bit overly fancy compared to the old ones that you got like on XP or earlier versions of Windows still. But you know, it's still a fun time. You still feel kind of stupid when you get yourself into an unwinnable situation by messing up. But it's satisfying when you can complete a game of Solitaire, and I'm talking about Klondike's Solitaire there. I know there's like variants of it. It's a lot easier if you play the 1-card variant rather than the 3-card variant, but that's its own deal. No, we're probably not getting a Solitaire Let's Play on the channel because I don't think that would work. Oh goody, the cat that we need to find is aggressive to people. Just our luck. So yeah, I guess the time for the next round of our wild cat chase. And this guy, I'm not quite sure what to make of his design. He looks a little bit spaced out most of the time. Like, granted, he has just seen a cat attack, so that's a little bit more justified here. But still, he was also kind of half asleep despite just seeing a cat attack us, so maybe that was why he didn't come to help, aside from just being a bit of a coward. That killer. Dude, like, come on, it's scary, but it is still a cat. Let's not be melodramatic here. So one thing I do know about this character of Stashen is apparently he does show up over the course of the series a few more times. And although we've already had the guide here, his main role in later games is that he is the tutorial for hint coins. And apparently in one of the games he gets disappointed that someone else has taught you how hint coins work before he gets the chance to, which I find kind of amusing. And I will say over time that I do intend to play more of this series because I'm just intrigued now. I really like Curious Village, and I have seen a few things hinting at what goes on in later games that piques my interest. I've seen a playthrough of the second game, but I will say that was a long time ago and I can't actually remember much from it. Other than the fantastic ending theme, the song Iris, which is a fantastic piece of music. And that puzzle there was just to basically look at the thing and try to pick out the changes. Easier said than done, because the change is very subtle, but it's there, and if you look hard enough you will see it. And yes, there we are trapped, we cannot get back to the car. So all we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at the Layton mobile and just wistfully wish we could get away. I'm joking, like clearly we want to get the golden apple and all the treasures first, but before that we have a puzzle, and this is one of the harder kind of puzzles to get down. And I will say that my approach to these kind of puzzles in general is a bit trial and error. For the sake of the playthrough, I was trying to follow a guide's instructions here, but just like tapping the directions while constantly looking back at the computer screen for the guide, it's not as easy as I wish it was. So I'm not going to be getting the optimal route here. I will end up taking a few more turns with this than you actually need to, but I never claim to be good at this. I'm just getting the cars out of the way through any means possible here. And I will say, over the course of the playthrough, you will need to get used to these puzzles taking a little bit longer than all the other ones, purely because it is very much a back and forth of look at the game, look at the guide, look at the game, look at the guide. And I know a more competent Let's Player would have memorised what to do beforehand, but I'm not that good at that. I'll say I do have a setup now that makes looking at the guide for this kind of thing a little bit easier. I have a second screen open so I can have the recording on one screen and have the guide on another. But even then, reading off a guide while trying to do it, it's still kind of time consuming and not as efficient as it could be. And usually what I do for games where there's not as much text, like it's not as long of a game, is I would print off the guide. Like when I was recording Curse of Monkey Island for the non-commentary channel, and when I've been recording the Chizo Mythos games, like, you know, 5 Days a Stranger and that series, I just have the guide on paper because it's a lot easier to read text off paper than it is off a screen. Like, that is something that I believe has been scientifically proven. It's just our eyes respond better to writing on paper than on a bright screen. And I'd like to do that for this, but this is a long game with a lot of puzzles, and I don't have that much printer ink to justify it. Here we are in the inn, and I know this feels like we're doing a lot of busy work when we're supposed to be looking for a cat, and the reason for that is because we are. But luckily, this character here is very friendly and is willing to make mountains move just so we can stay in her inn, which is very much appreciated. So yeah, we're just getting our lodging sorted ahead of time, so that once we've found the cat and once we've done whatever other menial tasks Lady Dahlia will want from us, we'll have somewhere to go crash, and that's a nice bit of safety to have. Ideally we wouldn't need it because we would be able to get out of the village and go home at the end of the day, but that's not going to happen, clearly, so we're going to stay in the town with the crazy puzzle people. So they don't have a room because everything's still being worked on. So where the fuck are we gonna end up sleeping? Are we just gonna sleep in a fucking cardboard box on the floor? I don't know. While she's preparing our room for us, this is yet another one of these ongoing mechanics in that throughout the course of the game from this point on, we're going to start collecting items from the puzzles that we're completing. And some of the items are more to Professor Layton's favour, and some of the items are more to Luke's favour. And if you pick the wrong one when it first comes up, it doesn't matter, you can always move it back later. I am going to be putting it in the right one so we don't have to waste any time later in the playthrough just rearranging things. But what you got to do is you just, once you've got everything, you can just arrange it. And it's not really that intuitive as to who's who, so you probably will end up using a guide, but the way it intends for you to do it is to look at the little comments on the end screen. But honestly, you're not missing much if you just look up a guide. But puzzle 112 here, one of the bonus puzzles. This, I believe this is based off a more famous painting, where there's a bit of an optical illusion where you can find an image hidden in the shadows of another image. Because I seem to recall one that's like, it's either a picture of a wine glass or a couple kissing, depending on how you look at it. But what you got to do here is just rearrange the tiles so that you can find this gentleman's beloved in the self-portrait of himself. It's quite a clever kind of puzzle, and it's another very visual one, which are my strength when it comes to puzzles, so that plays to my skills. Actually, I can't remember if I needed to use a guide for that one or not. I think I did it trial and error on my first playthrough, and then when I came back to record the game, I did just use a guide for efficiency. And what we've got coming up is another very visual based puzzle, and this is another matchstick one. This is puzzle 18 of Dust and Dustpan. We are seeing a layout of the matches here, and we just need to rearrange it so it looks like the dustpan is around the dirt. This is a very easy one, just move the matchstick in the middle to the left and then the one on the right downward, and you've got your rearranged dustpan. That's like the gig sorted.
There we go. Critical thinking is the key to success.
So, yeah, we do our part to keep St. Mystere clean. Like, we don't actually see cleaners for a little while, but St. Mystere does have a cleaner of sorts. So there's someone looking after the place, and on the whole, from what we've seen of St. Mystere, I will say that aside from the hole being locked in because there's no, like, crank in the bridge, like, aside from that little factor, I quite like the look of St. Mystere as a place to live. It seems like quite a peaceful little town, and that will stay the case for a lot of the game. Just from the way it's built up, it's a very small enclosed area, and I like towns like that. I will admit that in terms of infrastructure, it's not the best as someone who almost entirely lives online, and I doubt the internet connections there are that great, and also there doesn't seem to be a supermarket, so I would have to pay jacked up corner shop prices. Aside from like those couple of slight inconveniences, on the whole I do like the quaint setting. Agnes here is offering us some fish bones to help us with our cat quest, but as you'd expect from this game, it's another puzzle, and this is the third visual puzzle in a row, which I am certainly not going to complain about. This is another puzzle that I feel is quite a famous kind of puzzle variant. You've just got 3 ropes that we've got to try and divide up the pigs so that they're not going to get in each other's way, they're not going to fight. I don't think pigs are violent creatures, in fact I think they're pretty, you know, laid back, all things considered. Come on, one more. I can see where it's meant to go now, but past me was taking his time. There we go. We just put them 3 ropes there, and they're all in their own little segment. And I guess aside from that, there's also a practical use to dividing up the animals. Because I know that farming areas, like farmers tend to like to move their animals around to give the grass time to grow. And you see it a lot when you got herds of sheep. They'll have like a sheep enclosure, but every now and then they'll just move the sheep a little bit further down. So once the sheep have eaten all the grass in one spot, they'll just shuffle them along a little bit, and that way the grass can grow back in the dead patch, while the sheep can still eat the smaller section. And like, that's very smart. The sheep, you can kind of round them up easy enough, so it's not like they're gonna rebel against it. Like, you're not gonna get some fucking sheep rebellion, thankfully. That's quite a horrible thought now I've put into my head. You think fucking Shaun the Sheep or whatever going on a fucking uprising? No, thankfully, if a collie tells him not to, he's not going to. But I do like this Paulie character a lot. Paulie is very angry, very pissed off all the time. That is Paulie's character. Even when we help him, he'll sometimes get a bit snappy with us, and he won't be too happy with us trying to solve his puzzles for him. And I love that fucking smile there. That smile is so great. But all things considered, this puzzle, Puzzle 20, Unfriendly Commute, this is a very fitting puzzle for Paulie. What you've got to do is you've got to work out a route for these 4 different men who want to get home from work without encountering each other. Like, these characters just hate each other. They don't want to meet, they don't want to have to do the smile and wave sort of thing that you kind of have to do to people. Like, they don't want to see each other's faces. And I will say, puzzle-wise, this is a very basic trial and error kind of thing. You can just bluff your way through by trying something, seeing if it works. If not, then just trying something else. But the way to make it easier for yourself is the center point. If you get the B line out of the way first, then it becomes easier of knowing how to link the others up with this middle point that you know you can't cross. At least that's how I managed to make it work for myself. Maybe you can find some other ways. I think there's a few variants, as you saw at the end there. There's a few like corners you can cut and whatnot, or corners you can take differently, I should say. But ultimately, that's the general layout that you will need to find to get these characters to work or home from work from a safe distance from each other. So that's Paulie's problem solved. When Paulie talks about these characters, he probably means himself. He seems like the kind of person who has made a few enemies. He's probably got a few people who he would rather not have see his face. I will say, Paulie, from what we see of him, he's not a malicious person. He just seems to have an anger issue. And some people are like that. He's just livid. He's just waving his arm around, which is oddly proportioned to both his head and his body. And he has the world's tiniest neck. But we'll just look past that. He's pissed enough as it is. So yeah, he has another puzzle for us, and this does happen sometimes. You'll talk to a character, you'll solve their puzzle, and then you talk to them again and they've got another one. Some of the puzzles do expire, so you will miss them, although there is a way to get back those puzzles, which we'll see later on. But ultimately, that's not important now. What's important now is this puzzle, puzzle 21, Pill Prescription. This is one that it's a little bit cheeky with what it's doing. What you need to do is work out how many of this guy's tablets need to be numbered so that he knows which order to take them in. And there's a twist.
Every puzzle has an answer.
So, you may think if you just label all the pills, then he'll be able to take them in the right order. But you don't need to label all of them, and that's the trick. On the first day, he can just take the first pill, and it's not an issue, like, that one's been taken. But he can also leave one pill unmarked until the last day, and that's the one that might catch you off guard, because you don't need to label it if you know that that's the last one you take. So yeah, I think that one is a little bit cheeky. That not entirely the sort of thing you might come up with on your own. But it's still kind of a clever puzzle because of that. So like, yeah, it's a bit cheeky, like I say, but I can't be mad at it either, because when I first saw what the answer to that is, I did get that, oh, you clever bastards, kind of reaction to it, and that alone is satisfying in itself. So, like I say, I can't be mad. You know, they're pulling at me, they're twisting things in a way I wouldn't expect, but I didn't see through it, so who's the mug, really? And so this is a visual puzzle, but I don't think I actually got this one. This, what you got to do, you just got to find out which of these particular shapes you don't need to form a full square. So the three of them you will put together and you make a square, and the one that you don't use is the one that it's asking for. And so I guess that if you're not lazy and you just look at a guide, and if you wanted to figure out for yourself, I would imagine an easier way to make this doable for yourself would be to draw out the shapes on a piece of paper, cut them out, and then arrange them. Which you could do, and you could just then move them around more easily. You could manipulate them, twist them, turn them, do what you need to do to make them fit together. I didn't do that, so I looked at the guide, but I did figure out that that's what you're supposed to do to find the answer. So I guess I'm not entirely cheating. Maybe. Was Luke just accidentally rude and brought attention to the fact that he doesn't have much custom? And this is so obviously leading into a puzzle, and this particular kind of puzzle, it's like it's not a spoiler to say a few seconds ahead that it's going to be one of these move the liquids from one pot to another. You've just got to rearrange things, and it will try to encourage you to do it in the fewest moves possible. Again, you don't have to do it in the fewest moves possible as long as you get it into the 5 and the 3. Or what he's specifically asking for is that it wants you to get it halved. So you've got 4 in one of the pictures and 4 in another. So that's obviously going to be the 8 and the 5 ones that get used. So really, it is just a back and forth of emptying it into one, using what's left, putting in another. There's a short way of doing this, which, yes, I did look up. But this, to my knowledge, is quite a famous kind of puzzle too. Because I seem to recall, similar to the one where you were moving the sheep and the wolves across, I seem to recall having a puzzle like this in one of the edutainment games I played back in primary school too. I remember there being stuff like this, and I also remember there being a Tower of Hanoi puzzle as well, where you got to move the rings from one tower to another so that it's like the right height or the rings are in the right order. I can't remember exactly how it worked, but I do remember there would be some weeks in primary school where we would just get a session in the computer room and we would just go and play all these different educational puzzle games on the computers in there. And this was back in like the early 2000s, so you can probably imagine that the computers we were using weren't that great. Computers you could buy for cheap in the early to mid 2000s, they're not great, but you know, for me as a kid, having a Friday afternoon in the computer room, just playing all these different kind of games, you know, it was a lot more interesting than just listening to the teachers waffling on, I can say that much. And this character here, Nick, as far as I know, he has a different name in the US version. I believe he's actually called Flick in the American one, but they changed him to Nick here for whatever reason. But puzzle 25, equilateral triangle, you need to move just a few of the coins, just 3 of them, to turn the triangle over. So instead of being an equilateral triangle pointing up, it's an equilateral triangle pointing down. And really, you've just got to turn the corner ones around a bit. That is all you've got to do. It's a lot easier than it looks. So again, your best bet with this is probably to trial and error for a little bit until you get the gist of how you can move the corners, because it's the corners that need to move. Once you've made a corner somewhere where there wasn't a corner before, that's how you work your way toward it. That's how you get on the right track to getting this upside down triangle. Bunch of puzzle fiends, and we got a gizmo from it, so we're getting closer. I will say that the gizmos we're collecting to make this totally not dog, that is the one of the 3 different ongoing puzzles that we're going to complete first, purely because we're getting them at such a rapid rate. And so I think it might be like chapter 4 or 5 that we managed to complete the dog, whereas it's not going to be till right near the tail end of the game where we complete both the in puzzle and the painting scraps. And look, Claudia there, just chilling, but before we talk to Claudia, we are going to have another puzzle that we're going to find right in the dirty jars on the floor. That's lovely, having to pick this up just to see a puzzle. Puzzle 26, Bottle Full of Germs. This is a number puzzle, but it's an easy number puzzle. Because what you might think to do, you might try and lead yourself down a rabbit hole of complex multiplications and whatnot, but really all you've got to do is look at the fact that it started earlier. So instead of starting with 1 germ, we're starting with 2. So it won't take the full hour, it will just take 59 minutes. And that's really all there is to this puzzle. Look, the diagram. Asexual reproduction is a beautiful thing where you get a germ with a moustache at the top somehow. Not sure how that works, but okay. Look, it's been on the bloody floor. That's fucking filthy. You're the one who was willing to pick it up, Luke, so you can get the filthy, disgusting painting scrap out of it. That's actually a fair arrangement, if we're being honest here. Let's actually catch Claudia this time. We don't have a Pokeball for this thing, so we've got to use the good old-fashioned put the fish bones down on the floor. And because she's fucking stupid and doesn't realise that they're just bones, they don't have any fish meat left on them, she's going to come over to us and we can take her back to her owner. You know, if that was a smart cat, she would still be free. Yes, I am becoming accustomed to moving around, but we've seen a fair bit of the village at this point, but there's also still a fair bit of the village left to go that we haven't even touched on yet. So this is what I was referring to earlier, of if you miss a puzzle, the puzzle will go here to the House of Puzzles, or Granny Riddleton's shack. And that is basically your archive of any puzzles that you missed that you didn't pick up along the way. So, although I do recommend using the strategy wiki guide so you don't miss them along the way, if you do miss any just by chance or by accident or whatever, you can just go back to Granny Riddleton's shack and it will be there. But this maybe isn't the right time to talk about game mechanics when we have Matthew here in complete sheer panic. Come on, Layton, you know it's not the cat that's the problem here. For some reason with this dialogue, and I don't think this is something that they're meticulously going at, I think this is just the way I'm reading it, but it feels almost like Layton's playing dumb even though he legitimately has no way of knowing what's going on. It's just some of the expressions he's coming out with feel a little bit like he's playing up the fact that he doesn't know what's going on. And maybe that does make him look a little bit more suspicious. But we've had a murder. Somebody has died while we were out chasing a cat. I'm glad we could help prevent this. I'm not saying this is karma for Lady Dahlia wasting our time, that one of her servants, or whoever Simon's meant to be, has been killed. But I'm just saying, if we were here, there would have been more people to hold the fort. And Chelmy here does a fantastic job of making himself one of the most fucking unlikable people ever. It feels like so perfectly done as an unlikable detective, and you know, we've got to have someone in that scene, and he plays off of Layton's role of the guy who's both smart and incredibly likable very well. Because although Layton is very obviously the more fit for the job kind of character, in the fact that he's both good at what he does, he's receptive, he's got good intuition, and he's friendly, so people are likely to volunteer information to him to help with the case. He's not the man in the job. He's not the police officer, so anything he says, the inspector can just overrule him. And if it wasn't for Layton being such a friendly and receptive character, then we would see a lot more butting heads than what we actually have going on. But despite there having just been murder, these characters in this game, their main focus, their main thing that goes through their head is puzzles. So right in front of this crime scene, we're going to talk about how we can arrange seating around a table so that these brothers who don't get on with each other don't have to sit next to the brother that they in particular don't get on with. Because that's clearly the most important thing going on right now. I wasn't even thinking about it this way too much in terms of the when I was playing through the game, but when I'm talking about it now, this Gordon guy, he's got his priorities a little bit warped. Although, by the same token, some people do go back to their hobbies to help themselves through trauma. So it's not really out of left field, it just seems a little bit of a tonal dissonant kind of deal when we've just learnt about a murder. So yeah, we just arranged it, and with that particular puzzle, you can either do it the way I did it, or you can do it a mirror image to the way I did it. Either is valid. So it's not just a one and done, this is the right answer way. There are multiple ways you can complete it. Yeah, Bickering Brothers is the name of the puzzle, so cue the Blessed Union of Souls, because I fucking love that song. And eventually the whole opening the menu to put the robot dog piece away thing will stop happening, and it'll stop snitching on how little game time I've done, and it'll also make it harder for the game to snitch on me when I've had to do resets. Or at one point throughout my recording process where I did have to switch to a different game cartridge because the one I was using, for some reason it started crashing whenever it'd load up a puzzle. Which was a little bit annoying, but I think because I got it cheap pre-owned, it may have just had a damaged connector or something. Because I ended up just picking up a pre-owned copy on eBay and playing up to where I got to, and then from there on out I didn't have any problems, so I think it was just a particular game cartridge issue rather than just a game bug. Look, it's another puzzle. Matthew here is going to get called out for it, but we didn't call Gordon out for it, which is interesting. I think the thing with Matthew here is that this is more of a mandatory one, as far as I recall, whereas the other puzzle with Gordon, that's not so much, that's just an optional one that you can skip. But this is a puzzle that I managed to bugger up on my first attempt, purely because I wasn't thinking right. I thought I had it worked out, but I think I accidentally filled in the mirror of what it was supposed to be. Which, easy mistake to make, to be fair to myself, but still.
Every puzzle has an answer.
Well, why did you make us take a puzzle then if you don't have any useful information? We knew about the cog beforehand, so that's not really much. Although this is a different kind of cog. This seemed to have a bit of a cutout in it, and we found it, or the inspector found it even, when he was looking at the body. So maybe it is associated with the murder, but it could also just be a thing that's around, because this is like a very oldie kind of manor, and there's likely to be some weird and wonderful mechanical pieces lying here and there. We don't know, because with puzzling things like this, it's very tempting to start looking into everything, but there will occasionally be red herrings along the way. It's not necessarily saying this is one or this isn't one, but you know, it's very easy to get lost in a particular rabbit hole of thought. So, you know, like, there's a right balance of thinking hard, but not thinking too hard. So now we have a suspect. Raymond is the guy we spoke to on the way in here. He's the guy who was standing out by the boat, and we got the puzzle from him about the sinking ship at the start of the second chapter. So he is now being considered a suspect. And while it's not good to judge people by their appearance, he did seem a little bit shady. And having that hoo-hoo kind of vocal tick, that does seem a little bit of an eccentric character. So that kind of does make him seem a bit of a suspect, but by the same token, Layton is smarter than the inspector is, from what we've been able to pick up on. So maybe we should do our own investigation. And this is just a very drastic change in tone that we've had from chapter 2 to now leading on to the start of chapter 3, in the fact that chapter 2 was go find a cat, and now suddenly somebody's been killed. You know, we're sort of jumping a little bit quickly here, but to be fair, this was quite a long chapter, so we've had the chance to get to know everybody. We've had the chance to maybe think to ourselves of who is a little bit suspicious, maybe who seems like innocent, or who seems like they're going to be the most or least affected by things going on. And Dahlia seems a little bit shaken, which is completely understandable. This is someone she works with who has just mysteriously died, and there's a whole murder surrounding the manor she lives in, so she has every right to be shaken up, to be fair. But I mean, when he just mysteriously died and there were only certain people here, then the people are going to be suspects. So that's the nature of the beast here. I am sorry, Dahlia. But, ladies and gentlemen, join me next time where I'll be going into Chapter 3. See you then.